Um, Welcome to the Asian Americans for Democracy Power Hour. We're going to take a few minutes to, let people come on board and sign in. But, in kind of an exercise in community building, please tell us who you are, where you're from, how you're feeling, and how you feel about the Kamala campaign. We have in the chat, we're going to post a link for any friends who want to still sign up for the Zoom to get in. So that'll be appearing momentarily. Just tell your friends to click on that link, register, and we'll let them right into the session. We'll wait another minute or two for more people to come. Thanks all for joining us. I see we have people from New York, LA, San Francisco. So glad you could join us tonight. And we'll get going in a second. I'll just tell you a little bit of myself. I'm Eddie Wong. I'll be your moderator tonight. I'm one of the organizing committee members of Asian Americans for Democracy. I've been a political junkie for most of my life and once worked as Jesse Jackson's national field coordinator in the '88 presidential campaign. So I've kind of been around some of this stuff before. But, we have four really dynamic speakers lined up for you today. And although they can't see you, they can feel you if you put in the reaction emojis. And again, feel free to put comments in the chat and put your questions in the Q&A box. And we're gonna have time at the end to answer any questions you have directed at any of the panelists. Great. Love to hear about your work in Washington, Robert. That's great. Okay, well, people are still coming in. We have like 72 people on so far. So that's great. And I know we have a lot to say tonight, so I'm going to get rolling. So first of all, Asian Americans for Democracy is a project of the Kappa 21 Political Action Committee. And this was a group that has its roots back in the Coalition for Asian and Pacific Americans, which was founded by civil rights attorney Dale Manami in 1987. We are an all-volunteer group. Many of us have worked for years in the community, and we're also joined by people from Asian Americans Against Trump, which was a political action committee in 2020. So together with those folks and the board members from Kappa 21, which is chaired by Tamlin Tomita, we're ready to take on Donald Trump, and we're ready to elect Vice President Kamala Harris president and Governor Tim Walz vice president. Now, I think our combined age is something like 950 years, but we may be old, but we're still ready to rock and roll. So let's get started. AA4D's sole mission is to fund the 501c4 and PACs in the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander communities in the swing states. And the reason why we fund these groups is because they do year-round organizing. And because of that organizing, they're really known as social justice fighters. And they are the trusted messengers that can deliver the message to defeat Trump this fall and to vote for Harris Walz. So we know that in the swing states that we've identified, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander voters can be the margin of victory. And we know this because in 2020, that was the case in several states. And we'll hear more about that from our speakers tonight. In May of this year, AA4D distributed $500,000 to 10 organizations in the swing states. And these funds allowed for the hiring of staff, training of staff, and most importantly, allowed them to begin doing focus groups to develop messages for the digital ad campaigns that will roll out this September. Now, besides funding groups to do the ground game, we also funded organizations, namely Pivot, the progressive Vietnamese American organization, and Southeast Asian Action, C Action, and we'll hear from Casual later tonight, to do messaging work in Asian languages. We know that the majority of AA and HPI voters actually have their roots in Asian countries. So 57% of that electorate has access to materials not only in English, but also in Asian languages. So that's very important. So again, we want to thank all the donors, because without your support, we wouldn't be able to do all this work. Okay, so today's format is I'll be asking a few questions of the folks from the swing states. And we chose Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin for the first AA4D Power Hour, because these are the three states which are must-win for Harris and Walz. And these are states that were won by President Biden in 2020, and they are the backstop to defeating Donald Trump. We win these three states and we get 270 electoral votes. Now, we want more than that, because it's important that we fight in Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada. These are the other battleground states. And it's important to do that because we need to show Trump that he cannot advance his agenda any longer in American politics. That's part of our goal. And part of our goal, too, is to make sure that we elect Democrats up and down the ballot for House, U.S. Senate, state legislature. So with that, I want to start with Rebeka Islam, who is the executive director of APIA Vote Michigan Action. And I also want to note that in Michigan, AA4D also funded another organization, Rising Voices, which is active throughout the state in getting out the vote. And we'll hear from Jasmine Rivera and Regina Sang, hopefully in a future session. A little bit of context. Michigan has 15 electoral votes, and in 9 out of the last 12 presidential elections, whomever won Michigan became president of the United States. That's how important Michigan is. Now, it was won by Trump in 2016, and President Biden won it by 2.8% in 2020. AA and HPI voters are concentrated in 5 key counties that delivered nearly 60% of Biden's vote. So you can see the math here. We increase the AA and HPI vote in these counties, and we can deliver a winning vote for Harris and Walz. But before we begin about the turnout strategy, Rebeka, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into organizing, and a little bit about your organization.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Eddie. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. As Eddie mentioned, my name is Rebeka Islam, and I'm representing as the executive director of API Vote Michigan Action. API Vote Michigan has been working tirelessly to really empower the AA and HPI community here in Michigan. And we do that through voter registration and advocacy. Like many of us here and the organizations here, we believe in the power of our voices and our votes to bring about meaningful change that we've seen in the past and will continue to see. And as for me, my journey in organizing began when I was still in high school and driven by the need to fulfill community service requirements to graduate from high school. And what started as a requirement quickly turned into a passion as I realized the impact that dedicated community work can have on everyday people's lives. And this early experience laid the foundation for my continued commitment to civic engagement and community building. And along the way, I've had the privilege of meeting incredible mentors like Helen Zia and Sue Van and others who have been the backbone of the work at API Vote Michigan. And we're forever grateful for AA4D for their investment in our work, which is truly the work of the community.
You know, Rebeka, one of your main constituencies are Muslim Americans. And in the last Michigan primary, not only Muslim Americans, but many others voted uncommitted as a protest against President Biden's Gaza policies. What do you think, how will this change with Harris being the candidate? How will you be able to persuade these voters?
Yeah, and I also just want to talk a little about just in general, and I will talk on the community, the Muslim community, but also just turnout in general. And our plan to turn the community out to vote is multifaceted, right? We're focusing on both voter registration contact and digital contact to ensure that we reach every corner of our community. And one of our key strategies is to really build trust within the community but partnering with local leaders and organizations that are already people look for guidance. That includes faith-based organization, cultural groups, community centers that serve as hubs for the very diverse AA and HPI population. And we engage with our community members through direct services such as food drives, backpack drives, mental health workshops, monthly community tea sessions. And these serve as they serve a dual purpose by providing essential services to our community while also registering them to vote. At a given food drive, we typically register anywhere between 300 to 500 voters. And like you said, being trusted messengers and meeting our community where they are, whether it's at a food drive or a community gathering, we're able to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to make their voices heard. Regarding the concern about President Biden's Gaza policies, we recognize that that has been an intensely personal issue for many Muslim Americans and other communities. And our approach is really to acknowledge these concerns honestly, while also highlighting the stakes of this election. We believe in engaging in open dialogues where we listen to our voters' concerns and provide them with the broader context of what's at stake, not in just terms of foreign policy, but also domestic issues that directly affect their lives, daily lives, such as healthcare, education, and civil rights. So we are definitely finding ourselves in a challenging moment. And our goal isn't just for Vice President Harris to be the nominee who can defeat Trump. We want her to be the best nominee, the first Asian American, Black American woman who can who can be the best president and who can lead as the best president this country has seen, and a president for all people, including the Palestinian community. So our expectations for her are very high, and such expectation only come when you have a deep faith in someone's ability to lead. And again, I want to say this election is more than just winning. It's about ensuring that our future leader of our country represents all of us and leads with integrity and vision, and we are committed to seeing that vision through.
Great, thank you. We only have like 12 weeks left in the election, and actually early voting starts in October in Michigan. What are some of your biggest challenges in the next few weeks?
Just mentioned one of the challenges, right? But just voter turnout. And we can see that misinformation, disinformation, there's just so many, not just in the last 10 months, at the onset of October 7th, but even prior to that, misinformation and disinformation gets spread around in our community like rapid fire. So that is definitely one of our challenges that a lot of, and we're also seeing voter apathy, right? Like there's a lot of, that we've seen a dip in engagement, and it's our job to re-engage our communities through those dialogues that I mentioned and just meeting them where they are so they can still understand what's at stake and what it means to not turn out to vote this time.
Great. We're wishing you well in Michigan. Thank you for taking this time. I'd like to turn now to Pennsylvania, which has 19 electoral votes. Trump won it by less than 1% in 2016, and President Biden went into Election Day with a 5% lead in the polls, and he only won it by 1.17%. So you can just tell how close this race is. And even today, the race is pretty much essentially tied in Pennsylvania. Now, the majority of Pennsylvania's of 100,000 AA and HPI voters are concentrated in 5 counties, and these counties voted 60% plus for Biden. I know that Mohan had told me in the past that they're not only working in the Philadelphia area, the suburbs, but also Pittsburgh and central PA. So before you get into APIPA's turnout strategy, tell us about yourself, how you got into this work, and a little bit about your organization, and then go with it on the strategy. Okay, we're waiting.
There we go.
Gotcha.
So sorry, it was not letting me unmute myself. First of all, just want to say thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much to A4D and all the supporters on the call for all of the amazing fundraising work. Our strategy is what our strategy was in 2020 when we doubled Asian turnout in Pennsylvania and provided President Biden with his margin of victory. It's our strategy, that we implemented in 2022 when we elected Josh Shapiro as governor and John Fetterman as U.S. senator, as well as flipping the PA State House. We're going to run the best multilingual, culturally competent field operation in town. We're going to knock on 500,000 doors in 22 languages all across the state. We're going to make 5 million phone calls in 22 languages across the state. We're going to send 1 million mail pieces with the faces of our community leaders, trusted messengers from all across the state, telling our community to vote and who to vote for. And we're going to bolster that with the year-round organizing that we do on the issues important to our community that has managed to centralize us as the trusted messenger, as you say, for our communities all across PA. In Philadelphia, we're throwing down with the Save Chinatown Coalition to save Philly's Chinatown from destruction by predatory developers. And across the state, we're leading the fight for mental health reform and investing in nonviolent, unarmed, language accessible, culturally competent solutions that will ensure that when our communities undergo mental health crises, as they have all across PA, they're met with care and not bullets. And we're also investing in our candidates and in our leaders all across the state. So in target areas all across the Commonwealth, in areas where there are a concentration of Asian American voters and communities, we've intentionally recruited and supported local Asian American candidates to run for office and ensure that they got through their primaries, because we know that at the end of the day, doors are important, phones are important, language access is important, but one of the number one factors for Asian American turnout is the presence of an Asian American on the ballot. And before we expected the vice president to be the top of the ticket, we were already ready to ensure that in places like the Philly suburbs, in places like central Pennsylvania, in places like the Lehigh Valley, our communities would have members of their own community to vote for, to fight for, and to turn out for. And that they would have that encouragement and that incentive, not just at the top of the ticket, but all the way down the ballot, to get out and vote and make their voices heard. Because for us, we're a full ticket year-round operation. We're all in on the top of the ticket, the statewide elections, the presidential race and the U.S. Senate race are, as many of y'all may know, Pennsylvania is key to holding on to the U.S. Senate and Congress in addition to the White House. But we flipped the PA State House in 2022. And because of that, for the first time in 2 decades, we have the opportunity to pass language access reform, data disaggregation, healthcare access for our community, workers' rights for our community. And we're not going back to the days when conservatives could just ram through bills in the state house and state senate. And the only thing stopping Pennsylvania from becoming an anti-choice, anti-environment, anti-labor state was the governor's veto. And so we're laser focused on holding on to the state house and moving towards flipping the state senate, in addition to ensuring that our voters deliver Vice President Harris, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, with her margin of victory at the statewide level.
That's great. Now, one thing you related to me in the past is how much coalition building you actually do statewide, because as most people know, Philadelphia's Black vote is critical to delivering for the Democrats. And this year with Harris, we expect a high turnout. What sort of work do you do in terms of coalition with all the other groups? The Latino population, for example, in Pennsylvania is also growing.
We work incredibly closely together because we know that in PA, it's our voters together that make up the margin of victory. And in down ballot races all across the Commonwealth, when we're able to link up with our siblings in those other communities, we're able to flex real power in primaries and general elections. So please don't tell anyone this, but actually this morning we all met together, organizations that share our values, share our alignment, and share our strategy in all communities, rural communities, Latinx communities, Black communities, organizations that represent the eastern side of PA and the western side of PA to talk about joint endorsements and a full rollout for our shared support for the vice president and the entire ticket to ensure that our voters are hearing from us in the media and in the press that this is someone we stand behind and that this is someone who we're calling on to commit to represent our values and meet their voters where they are when it comes to supporting housing justice and our ethnic enclaves like Chinatown, when it comes to supporting healthcare access and language access, and just to say when it comes to supporting our Palestinian and Arab community members and ensuring that we get that ceasefire in Gaza.
Great. What challenges do you see in the next few weeks?
There's only a few weeks left, and we don't have enough money. At the end of the day, elections in Pennsylvania are large scale, right? Like it's a huge state geographically, not just in terms of the number of voters we're talking about. And elections here come down to 40,000 votes to 80,000 votes. So in addition to all of the doors we're going to knock and all of the calls we're going to make, we need to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars for direct mail programs that are in 10 languages so that we can hit every Asian voter that lives in rural Pennsylvania or whose door we just can't get to knock. We need to invest in digital ads that are multilingual and are culturally competent so we can ensure that we're hitting young folks on campuses and elders in in senior housing that we're not able to get to their doors. And we need to layer all of that and roll it out. And traditionally, organizations like ours, funders and donors understand that that they need to give us money to knock doors and make phone calls. For Asian organizations, they understand that we need to be able to do that work multilingually. And in some cases, they understand that it just simply costs more to work in 22 languages than it costs to work in one or two. But in too many cases, campaigns and funders are used to just cutting a check to a direct mail firm or a national digital ad buyer, not working through local organizations that have the messaging, have the graphics, have the faces and voices of those trusted leaders and messengers on the ground like we do, that makes our work, even our paid media like mail and digital, so much more effective. So one of the things we need right now is more money to close that mail budget and that digital budget gap. And that's why I'm so grateful for all of the work y'all are doing to get us those resources. The other thing we need is just more people. We're incredibly grateful to the folks who are already coming through to support us in the final 4 weeks of the election. And I especially want to shout out Seed the Vote, which many of y'all work with, which is working to get us phone bankers and canvassers from across the country. But if anyone's interested in coming to Pennsylvania and throwing down with us, we have the capacity to take volunteers. We have the capacity to take in folks who want to spend 2 weeks of their lives knocking doors and is what is the most important election of our lifetimes until the next one. We're ready for folks to come through and work through us like you did in 2020 and 22 to ensure that we're winning this election for everybody across the country.
Thanks so much, Mohan. We're going to actually post links to all the organizations in the chat at the end, so you can contact them directly if you want to volunteer and donate. And of course, we have our donation button available too, and I'll be talking about it a little bit later, but right now we have a $50,000 matching fund. So any gift you make, dollar for dollar, will be matched, and we want to have another 100,000 to give out by the next week or so. Okay, I'd like to turn now to our next guest, Kabzuag, who's the co-executive director of Southeast Asian Action, and in Wisconsin. Now, we funded C Action along with Pivot to develop messaging and digital ads for Vietnamese, Hmong, and Southeast Asian communities. And before we get into more of her story, she's also the founding director of Freedom Action Now, which is a Black Asian organization that we've also funded in Wisconsin. And we hope to hear from Monica Dawei in a future session. But for now, let me set a little context. Wisconsin's a little bit different than the other states. It's nearly 80% white, and 1/3 of the population is in the rural area, which tends to vote more conservatively. Now, Trump won it in 2016, and Biden won it narrowly with less than 1% of the vote in 2020. So we know it's going to be a close election. But Wisconsin has a really long progressive history. And in 2023, Democrats and independents ran a great campaign to flip the state Supreme Court. How do you see using some of these momentum that's been created? And then more importantly, you told me in the past that the Hmong vote alone can be the margin of victory. That's astonishing. Hmong are the largest Asian group in Wisconsin. So tell us about yourself and then have a go at the strategy.
Absolutely. So I am from Wisconsin. I was born in Laos as a refugee. I have been living in Wisconsin for the last 45 years. Wisconsin is predominantly white. For those of you who are just joining us and don't understand the context of organizing as a Hmong person, as a person of color, as somebody who is from Wisconsin, you have to team up with other progressive communities. So hence the FAN or Freedom Action Now being Hmong and Black, and understanding that it takes the whole progressive community to stand together to make our electoral voice even be heard. And yes, I do believe that the Hmong vote in Wisconsin is the margin of win. Why do I believe that? Because through our work in Wisconsin in the past 10 years, at Freedom Action and Freedom Inc., we were able to re-grant some funds to small sections throughout the state of Wisconsin, which is primarily red, and it always goes red. But in the places where we had partnership, it turned blue. And so in those places, we had Hmong partners, Hmong feminist organizations on the ground. And so that's why I say we are the margin of win. And Wisconsin does have the largest Asian American population is the Hmong population. Primarily, our people are pretty progressive voters. And I think that with our partnership with you all, you talked about like messaging, and it's important that people who look like you give out the message. And so our partnership with you has been about speaking to our community, making sure that we understand what it is that they need and what are they concerned about, so that we can start to message in a way that they understand that it's important. They understand who they vote for is going to impact their everyday in the next 4 years.
I know you've been doing some focus groups recently. What kind of issues are emerging as top concerns, and how will you turn that into digital ads?
Yeah, it's been so interesting. Surprisingly, we've asked our community what makes a safe and healthy community, and the majority of them have said safe access to healthcare, safe schools, body autonomy. Our young people really are talking about body autonomy, and which was really surprising to us. A lot of them care about the economy. Many of our people throughout the US, we talked to almost about 70 people, ages from 18 to 85, and they all talk about the same stuff, that they care about body autonomy, they care about access to healthcare, they care about their children's education, and they care about the economy. They are workers who work in the assembly line, and they talk about access to the poll. They talk about getting some of the things that we're learning is so amazing. They're saying, hey, can C Action create a permission slip that I can actually take to work and say on voting day, can I take this hour off so that I can go and vote? They're talking to us about, we want to vote for somebody who understands the cost of fish sauce. The Lao community, right? It's so amazing. And we want to vote for somebody who actually understands the cost of sriracha and the increase of sriracha. So these are the type of messaging that I'm like, this is really interesting. Talk to your community, then you can start to connect to them. But they're talking about it in a context that they understand, and that they want to vote for somebody who actually goes shopping, who actually knows what fish sauce is. And so I think that it's for the Democrats, it's a good and positive and hopeful for them if they can speak our language.
That's great. Also Wisconsin is one of the few states that has same day voter registration. So you can actually register on election day and vote. How do you get that message out to your communities?
I mean, I think that Wisconsin has such a progressive Hmong, these progressive feminist Hmong organizations have been working in the past 10 years. They actually need funding to take people to the polls on that day. I have seen through my work with Freedom Inc. and Freedom Action Now and now C Action is that we actually drive our to the polls. That's one way of making our people, how do we get this information to them? We asked them, we asked in our focus groups, we're saying, where are you getting your information? No one is talking about CNN. No one's talking about political NPR. They're talking about, I get my information from my family. I get my information from my friends, from YouTube, from TikTok. And so we're learning where our people are getting their information. And I think that this is the beauty of this partnership with AA4D and us, is that now we're going to figure out where we go and where we send these messages so that people can know where to go vote, when to go vote. And the other beautiful thing that we're doing is that we're partnering with local leaders, natural leaders, organizations, community leaders, and we're asking them, hey, there are things that we can do as a C4, and there are things that you all can do as community leaders. And that partnership, I think, is going to be the key.
Great. That's wonderful. We're going to hear a lot more. I see questions coming in through the Q&A box, so we'll get back to that. Thank you, Kabzuag. I'd like now to turn to our special guest, Helen Zia, who is a very noted writer, activist, Fulbright scholar, and founder of the Vincent Chin Institute. And Helen is one of the organizing committee members of AA4D. She'll talk not only about her observations about what's at stake in this election, but also the special role that AA4D plays. Take it away, Helen.
Thanks, Eddie, and hello, everyone. First, I'd like to thank these trusted Asian American grassroots leaders who are working so hard to keep our community's voices included in this democracy. And indeed, they are fighting to protect democracy itself. And I thank all of you for joining the Zoom about what these leaders are doing to mobilize the swing vote in swing states and why they need your support to keep the momentum going. As some of you know, I've spent my adult life as an activist, a writer, and a journalist. And in the 54 years that I've been able to vote, I have fought mainly for issues related to justice and peace, for civil rights and human rights, for Asian Americans and other people of color, for women and LGBTQ people and immigrants, and many other issues. In my 5 decades as a voter, I have focused on issues, not so much on particular candidates. But this year is different, and I'll tell you why. Because this year, the health, well-being, and even the existence of our AAPI families and communities are at stake. And that's why AA4D's volunteers stepped up. Because this whole system of democracy that is based on the laws and the Constitution is at risk, as well as the very systems that protect our AAPI communities when we fight to be treated fairly and to be treated as full human beings, not as second-class citizens because of how we look or how we speak or where we worship or what our immigration status is or who we love or what food we eat. Those laws are supposed to protect us when we stand up for women's bodily integrity or when we speak out to demand an end to hate, an end to police violence, or to genocide in Gaza. Now, we know that that legal framework is not possible, but it is what makes it is not perfect, but it is what makes it possible for our AAPI communities to even get to America in the first place. And this framework is the guardrail. They are the guardrails that allow us to fight to make those laws better. So let's be clear, those guardrails will disappear if the swing states go to Trump. And I could go on with the long list of things that will happen immediately if that convicted felon is elected. But I'm sure you know that there is a roadmap already to making America white again, as specified in Project 2025. And I've asked to have a link put in the chat to a comprehensive New York Times article that tells exactly what will change. One thing is clear. The vast majority of people in our beautiful AAPI communities are immigrants, refugees, and the children or grandchildren of immigrants and refugees. And that puts our community directly in the crosshairs of another Trump administration. AA4D is not making up these threats. How can we forget the way that our communities were made into scapegoats by Trump, literally turning our communities into punching bags for hate mongers, routinely called spies or terrorists or disease carriers or criminals from shithole countries, So forget about having a voice as full Americans. In AA4D's view, our communities have 0 degrees of separation from the harm that was and will be inflicted on our families and communities. You know, in 2016, I was so worried that my 87-year-old immigrant mother could lose her naturalized citizenship and maybe even get deported because she and my dad had received Medicaid benefits legally from the government. But that put her right in the bullseye. In fact, I was so worried that I considered rewriting a portion of my book, Last Boat Out of Shanghai, to take out some parts of my mom's story. Because how could I put my mom in harm's way? Well, as it turns out, my mother passed away before that could happen. And then the Biden-Harris administration put a stop to that draconian anti-immigrant policy. But it's high on the list to be put back in place, just as one of the many poison arrows that are in the 900 pages of Project 2025 that are aimed directly at our communities. We can't let any of this happen again, and that's how I got involved in AA4D to stop Trump. And now with the candidacy of Kamala Harris, I can also say that we have a presidential candidate who I and AA4D can get behind because we know that she really sees our AAPI community. She grew up in an immigrant family as part of our AAPI communities. She already knows that Thailand and Taiwan are not the same. She knows how hate rhetoric can literally kill our communities. She knows this because she sees us. And that's a whole lot more than most of the other 40+ presidents. And no, I do not think that any politician is perfect. But this year, the difference for our AAPI communities is as clear as night and day. Harris and Walz have a record of standing up for the laws and constitution that our communities depend on to fight for our rightful place in this democracy. The other candidate and party has a plan to dismantle our communities and our guardrails. I will add that AA4D is not just about November 8th. If we succeed, AA4D intends to make it clear that our votes and our dollars have made a huge difference, and we will not allow our communities to become invisible again. That's also why we are continuing to directly support AAPI grassroots efforts so that our communities will be counted. Some of you have already made generous donations. Thank you. Your donation makes it possible for Kabzuag, Rebeka, and Mohan to do their critical work in Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania. Some of you are here to check us out, and I hope you'll dig deep or deeper because the health, well-being, and very existence of our AAPI communities are at stake. Let's make sure that the White House will be the people's house in November. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. All right. Let's see, I want to direct you to the chat, and we're going to put up some links to the organizations and how to contact them. If you want to donate to them directly, that's fine too. We encourage people to donate to AA4D because we bundle the money. A lot of people, like we have 10 organizations, they do different things. The media part is as important as the ground game. So we try to use our best judgment to help these groups in the key states. We have time for questions and answers now. So we've gotten some really good questions in the chat. I hope we can get to most of them, but I'll start with one that's related to election protection work. We already know from the news that Trump is going nuts. I mean, he's flailing, and he's really saying to people that the election is going to be stolen because he's losing the election at this point. So what does AA4D, how do the groups that we fund deal with election protection work? And I'll throw that to any one of the panelists if you have any plans for that work now. Who wants to take that on?
I can say in our case, we play a pretty central role in Pennsylvania's election protection and democracy defense infrastructure, similar to many other organizations of our kind in other states. For us, APIA is the statewide Asian American, Pan-Asian advocacy and political organization. But on the 501c3 side, we have 20 member organizations all across the state that we fundraise for, and coordinate around shared civic engagement strategy. So we're going to be plugging in our 20 member orgs into local election protection and voter protection efforts. And we're also running the Election Protection and Democracy Defense Coalition, the multiracial PAN movement coalition for all of southeastern Pennsylvania, which is where the majority, it's where 70% of Asian Americans in Pennsylvania live. As part of that, we've set up an election protection hotline, very similar to the one that APIA Vote runs nationally with ALDEF and the Leadership Conference, if you're familiar with that, but one specifically for Pennsylvania that can operate year-round in 22 languages, so that we are ensuring that our voters have access to the information and the support structures that they need. And all of this is connected to organizations like the ACLU, Common Cause, and All Voting is Local, that kind of bolster and provide the back end for all election protection and democracy defense work in the state. And especially, we played this role in 2020 and 2022 when we mobilized our members all across the state to ensure that as white supremacists, white nationalists, and Trump supporters were mobilizing to vote counting sites in the state and ballot boxes, mail drop boxes all across the state, we were able to mobilize our people as well to shut them down and ensure that the vote counting could go, could go forward. And we're expecting to have to do that again this year. And so we've spent all year planning for that to ensure that we have the infrastructure, the staffing, the volunteers, the members, the comm support, et cetera, so that we don't just win this election on November 5th, but we win it all the way through Inauguration Day as well.
Great. I know, Kabzuag or Rebeka, do you have anything to add on election protection?
I just wanted to say, I think
yes. Go ahead.
Looking at this from a grassroots organizing perspective, there's the election protection that requires lawyers and ACLU, but really the best protection that we can offer our people is to give them the education to help them understand their rights before they even vote. One of the things that we learned during the Black Power movement and the George Floyd uprising, where Wisconsin, we actually had to go to the polls to vote. And we basically vote for your rights or actually get COVID, right? And so we didn't have a choice. But one of the things that Freedom Inc. and FAN was able to do was we were to participate in a Joy at the Poll. So basically we hosted parties. We showed up and people who looked like us, so that people in places where the majority of our people voted. And so I think those type of protection is really important, that you show your face and you actually, so we played music, we had food, and we celebrated and we were there. And that's one of the things that I think we can do. The other thing is, if you have people who are thinking about funding or donating to AA4D, one of the things that I would say is that it is important to donate now, but the fight for those of us on the ground, it does not end after election or the day of election. No matter who wins, we still have to hold those in power accountable for making sure that they do right by our people. And so I would even push you all to say, hey, it's not enough just to donate now to get us through, that you continue to donate so that those of us on the ground can continue to do election protection beyond the election day. And so I just wanted to add that.
Rebeka, do you want to add something?
Yes, in addition to everything that was mentioned, similarly here in Michigan, we also have voter assistance hotlines to answer any last-minute questions and address issues that might come up. And we also utilize the nonpartisan hotline through APIA Vote National as well. Another thing that we also do is we have WhatsApp. Our community lives on WhatsApp, majority of our community members. So on election day, we actually have a QR code for people to join our WhatsApp groups. So if they have last minute questions, they can also text us in the WhatsApp group or send us a voice message, voice note. For those of you who are familiar with WhatsApp, they can send us messages there. I know this because my dad lives on WhatsApp. my whole family was on WhatsApp, but that's another story. So we are constantly communicating with our communities through WhatsApp, even on election day. And do they only not send us information that they might need? They also send us their selfies. They send us pictures of their sticker that says I voted. So it's, you know, one way to help each other out and motivate, but also really celebrate the democracy that we have, the opportunity for us to be able to have a voice in our democracy, which might not be the case for many of us from where we come from. So just want to share that as well.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. You know, Helen and several speakers have referenced the long game, which is Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander empowerment. And that means registering people. We have a question from a viewer in LA who asks, you know, what percentage of Asians are not registered? And how do you motivate them? They're eligible to vote, but they're not registered to vote. And is there a different messaging you give to people who came from a foreign country versus people who are third or fourth generation? Does anyone want to take that on?
So quickly from our focus groups, what we learned from the Khmer community was that they said that they don't have a choice but to vote, because surviving genocide means you have a responsibility for those who didn't survive, and you have a responsibility to vote, because those who cannot vote, your vote becomes the voice for everybody. And so I just wanted to add that.
Great. Any other comments on that question? I know there's been a trend for greater voter registration, and particularly among people who were permanent residents and became naturalized citizens. So we're seeing an increase in North Carolina, a lot of other states of new voters, and that's a great thing. We have another question. What would you each do with more funding? And you've alluded to that in some of your comments, but we have so little time left, weeks. What is the thing you need the most? Is it more digital ads, more mailers? How do you reach people with this new candidate in their eyes? You know, a lot of people are saying, even though she's been vice president for 3.5 years, people just don't, you know, really know what she stands for right now. How do you deal with that question of what do you need at this moment?
It's a money question. Can I go first? With additional funding, I think, just like many of the other organizations, we would greatly expand voter registration. We just had a primary on, when was it? I can't remember, just last Tuesday. So we saw there was a deep and like just engagement. People were just not engaging, and there's still so many folks that still need to be registered to vote. And that is really really critical for our state, especially those in underserved AA and HPI communities. With additional funding, we could hire more candidates and enhance our outreach. You know, door-to-door canvassing still is the #1 effective turnout our people and turn out to vote. We'd also be able to hire more community and host more community conversations to engage with voters directly. As I mentioned earlier, there's still, you know, a lot of people are just disengaged, and we need to find ways to engage them. And that happens through hosting community gatherings and really having community conversation. And also just more funding and more resources would also allow us to combat like all the misinformation and really just support AA and HPI candidates and really amplifying our community's voice and just shaping this election.
Great. I think Mohan addressed this question already in his remarks. I think, Kashu, I have a question along the same line. Like you had mentioned to me earlier that you guys do a lot of work on YouTube channels. Can you talk a little bit about like what sort of funding is needed to do stuff like that?
It's so expensive. You all know that media, messaging, getting the right messengers out there to say the right things from the focus group, it is going to be costly. And I just want to put out there that in addition to what the other speakers have said, we're going to use that. But one of the things that you all should know about Southeast Asian communities is a message that is crafted in Minnesota can actually be used in the Hmong community there, could actually be used in Wisconsin, and can be used in North Carolina, could be used in Michigan. And so I think that you all were so smart to invest in Southeast Asian action and our strategy, because we actually want, what we've learned from Southeast Asian communities is that they said that they get their information from families and friends. And so we intend to come up with the right messaging. We intend to hit all these YouTube channels. We intend to put ads out, but we do not have funding. And so I think that that's what we're going to use it for. And yeah, I think it's going to be so important.
Great. We have another question about, if you don't live in a battleground states, what can you do to push the Harris-Walz ticket? Why is it important for you to get involved? Anyone want to tackle that? I mean, I could take a stab at it. I mean, you know, a lot of people who live in blue states sort of take it for granted that, you know, Harris and Walz are going to win. We need the maximum turnout and the maximum vote. You know, we need to beat Trump with a stick, you know, and that stick is voting. And that means driving up the totals. President Biden won 81 million votes in 2020. We need to like reach that and way beyond that, because we have a story to tell, and that is to the American people that this is enough. You know, we hate sequels. We do not want a repeat. So that's one thing you can do. Vote because it really matters for the national count. Secondly, you can help by supporting groups like AA4D and support all the groups in our network, because they're doing the work. And as everyone has said, there's not much time left. That means like writing postcards. That means doing phone banking. That means supporting groups like Seed the Vote, which actually will pay to send volunteers to a swing state. So those are all things that people can do.
Can I just add that,
yeah.
like, for example, Hmong Americans and Southeast Asian Americans have a great relationship with Walz. I think one of the things that you all can do is call Michigan Southeast Asian communities, call Pennsylvania Southeast Asian community, call Wisconsin. And so these are the kind of things that you can give back, because you have stories and you have intimate, you know, stories about your involvement with Walz. And so I think that this is going to be instrumental in making sure that our people go out and vote for the right people.
And I would just also add, you know, this is all like offline work, but we also need to support just online. You know, there's a whole movement on social media now, and if you see someone doing good work, if you see any of our organization sharing, then also please share it and repost, support it. Every single day, our comms interns just sit there deleting hate comments, and just really, there's just so much negativity that are coming on our social media posts. So even if it's not our organization, if you see an organization that you believe in and it's getting behind the right things, then support them online too. You know, just drop a positive comment. It goes a long way. So please stay engaged online from other states, and support your friends in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin.
We have another question about working with Gen Z voters. We know that in general, AA and HPI voters are younger, and there is a generational shift going on. How are they involved in your organizations, and how do you address them with messaging that really resonates with them?
For us, so many of our founding member organizations came up as youth organizations or run amazing youth programs. And so many of those youth now power our work. They are our canvassers, they are our organizers, they're our field managers, they're our field directors all across the state. And they came up with an understanding of how to organize their younger communities around work like this. Secondly, we're investing in Asian student associations and other Asian youth groups all across the state. We're training them on voter registration. We're funding them to do nonpartisan peer-to-peer voter turnout. We just wrapped up our summer organizing school, where we pay young people $15 an hour to attend organizing trainings and political education sessions, and then actually spend the summer implementing that in the field, in their community all across the state. And lastly, we're also about to launch an influencer program where we're resourcing Asian American youth influencers. And just to say, especially not the ones who are always going on about politics and movements and voting, but the fashion influencers, the food influencers, the cultural influencers that many of our younger communities hear a lot about, hear a lot from, follow really regularly, but aren't used to getting this kind of messaging from, and therefore we're able to reach them in that way as well, in addition to the mail, the digital, the door knocks, the phone calls, the year-round organizing around the issues that they care about, the resourcing of their youth organizations so that they're hearing it from their peers, things like that.
Right. I know several of your organizations have youth development aspects of your organizations as well. Let's see. We have another question, again, back on how to convince the uncommitted voters. I mean, what's your gut feeling about this? I mean, okay, let's be honest. I don't think Harris necessarily will change that differently than Biden's stance on Gaza. We have to live with that. I hope it's different. I hope the pressure really works in this case. But what do you tell people to convince them that they need to struggle with that and still vote for Harris?
Can
Go
I?
ahead.
Okay. I mean, I'm committed to start here in Michigan. So I think when engaging with uncommitted activists, it's really start by listening to their concerns and understanding their hesitation and really focus, and that's something that we've been really driving, focus on the shared values and the positive impact their involved can make, right? And highlight the success stories where activists led to real change, and just really offering flexible ways of how getting involved that align with their interest. And really, yeah, it's just really like what's at stake when you're choosing to not vote. What's at stake is really what we've been pushing, and it's a lot of work, and unfortunately we don't have a lot of time. So that's why we need to be having more conversation, more dialogues with community members that are feeling that way, to kind of give them the alternative, which is not for our community at all. So really having those meaningful conversation and dialogues, that's going to really push it for us, and staying hopeful.
Great. I have another question, and that is, do your organizations work with the faith community, and how does that part of the coalition get woven into your work?
Just to say, like, obviously there are some legal restrictions, and so a lot of that work happens on the C3 side rather than through our work directly. But we work really closely with mandirs, masjids, and temples, as well as churches all across the state. A lot of that is through our member organizations, and then when faith leaders or organizers in the space want to get more politically involved, they get moved over to our organization to do that work separately. They're incredibly active in a lot of our issue fights, especially the Save Chinatown Coalition and our member work. And just to say, we've seen so many, members of our faith community show up huge for Gaza, and civically engaging and organizing our community in that way because of the networks between Indonesian churches, Korean churches, and mosques all across the state that already exist. So in a lot of cases with these religious institutions, because of the legal restrictions, the most we can do directly is to support them, to encourage their folks to vote, or ensure that they're hearing the same message from some of the leaders, but in a different space. But we're also, because we know exactly where all of these religious institutions, these mandirs and mosques are, we're able to geofence every one of these institutions across the state with digital ads. And so if you are a person with a cell phone who has walked into a Korean church or a Hindu temple every week for the last month, you're going to get a digital ad telling you to vote for Harris and Walz. If you are a person with a cell phone who has walked into a Vietnamese grocery store or spent enough time in Chinatown every week for the last month, you're going to get a digital ad asking you to vote for Harris and Walz. And that's a way that we, through our knowledge of the geography of our faith community and our cultural institutions across the state, even if we can't be in there directly, we're still able to engage with, our members of our community there.
Great, thank you. We're about 1 minute away from calling a close to the AA4D Power Hour. I want to thank you for joining us. We did have one question about what are the elections invalidated by local registrars? And just a brief answer to that there'll be teams of lawyers dealing with that. But the most important aspect of that is the election will not be over. It will not settle this. The movement that Trump represents is bigger than him. So we have a long fight ahead of us. I hope you'll stay with us. I want to thank all the panelists, Helen, Kajwa, Mohan, Rebeka. I want to thank our producer, Trez Jimenez, and Leah Shigemura. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I mean, we've gotten donations from this session already today. I love all the emojis popping up. We're going to do more of these sessions, so stay tuned with us. And, again, this session is recorded, so we will share the link with you, and you can tell your friends about it and tune in, okay? So thank you once again for joining us, and let's fight to save our democracy, all right? Take care. Bye-bye.